As President Trump arrives in France for the annual G7 summit, two distinct narratives are emerging to define the visit. On one side of the aisle, the focus is on a sudden and potentially seismic shift in Middle East policy involving Iran. On the other, the story is about the restoration of American leadership and the strengthening of old alliances. With competing headlines about peace deals and diplomatic handshakes, it can be difficult to distinguish between the optics of the summit and the substance of the agreements being announced. The Group of Seven, or G7, is an informal forum of heads of state from the world's most advanced industrialized economies. The summit serves as a venue for discussing and coordinating economic policy, but it often addresses pressing global security issues. This year's gathering is taking place in the French Alps, a setting chosen by the host nation to facilitate informal dialogue away from the capital. Historically, these summits are as much about the bilateral meetings on the sidelines as they are about the official joint communiqué. We can confirm that Donald Trump has arrived in France to attend the G7 summit. This arrival marks the beginning of a series of scheduled engagements with other world leaders, including the host, French President Emmanuel Macron. According to reports from PBS NewsHour Politics, the summit is currently convening in the French Alps. The Washington Times Politics reports that French President Emmanuel Macron is the official host of this year's gathering. Al Jazeera reports that upon arrival, President Trump touted an ambition regarding Ukraine, though specific details of that ambition were not immediately fleshed out in initial dispatches. Regarding the most headline-grabbing element of the trip, Al Jazeera reports that President Trump stated a newly announced Iran agreement is a step toward peace in the Middle East and beyond. Furthermore, PBS NewsHour Politics reports that the president announced an agreement which he claims will bring an end to the U.S. war with Iran, signaling a major pivot in American foreign policy stance, if accurate. The dynamics between the U.S. and France have also been a point of discussion. NPR World reports that French President Emmanuel Macron met with Donald Trump, and according to the same outlet, Macron congratulated the president for signing the new Iran agreement. The Washington Times Politics adds that Trump sought to dispel talk of tension with Macron, suggesting an effort to project unity despite past reported friction between the two leaders. Progressives and center-left media are characterizing the summit primarily through the lens of this newly announced Iran agreement. For those on the left, the story here is a potentially significant diplomatic breakthrough that could de-escalate long-standing tensions in the region. They argue that if the reported agreement holds, it represents a return to multilateral engagement and a step away from the brinkmanship that has defined recent relations. The focus is heavily on the substantive policy implications and the possibility of bringing an end to conflicts in the Middle East. In this framing, the emphasis is placed on the end to war narrative and the humanitarian and geopolitical stability that could follow. Progressives argue that the success of the G7 should be measured by these concrete policy outcomes rather than the pageantry of the event. They view the Iran deal as the central achievement of the trip, suggesting it validates a diplomatic approach to statecraft. Consequently, this perspective tends to downplay the personal rapport and making nice dynamics between Trump and Macron, viewing them as secondary to the hard-won details of the agreement. Conservatives and right-leaning outlets characterize the event as a clear demonstration of President Trump's diplomatic leadership on the world stage. Supporters argue that the summit showcases the restoration of unity with key allies like France, emphasizing that the personal relationship between Trump and Macron is strong and productive. In this view, the event is a victory lap for American foreign policy, highlighting the president's ability to navigate complex international relationships and command respect among peers. The right's framing focuses heavily on the atmosphere of the summit and the projection of strength among world leaders. Conservatives contend that the optics of the meeting, images of cordiality and agreement, are vital for projecting American stability and resolve. This perspective tends to omit the specific details and potential geopolitical complexities of the Iran nuclear agreement itself. Instead, it focuses on the fact that an announcement was made and that the U.S. is leading the conversation, treating the existence of the deal as a proof point of effective leadership rather than a subject of technical policy debate. Turning to the coverage landscape, we are seeing a distinct gap in how this story is being processed across the media ecosystem. Currently, coverage is quite one-sided. This story has not yet been picked up across the full political spectrum in a meaningful way. Because the reports are so fresh, a like-for-like coverage comparison isn't yet possible. This creates a blind spot where the initial reporting is driven by the specific narratives each outlet usually prioritizes, either the policy details of the Iran deal or the optics of the alliance, without a comprehensive cross-examination from opposing viewpoints. The absence of spectrum-wide coverage means that crucial context is likely being left out of the immediate analysis. For instance, the left's focus on the deal's text might miss the diplomatic signaling intended by the right, while the right's focus on summit optics might overlook the feasibility of the agreement's implementation. Until more outlets weigh in, the blind spot remains the full picture of what this agreement actually entails and how it fits into the broader strategy of the G7 nations, leaving the audience with only partial snapshots of a complex event. Let's fact-check the key claims surrounding this summit. We have verified that Donald Trump arrived in France for the G7 summit. This confirms the basic premise of the reporting. However, we must look closely at the claims regarding the Iran agreement. Reports that Trump stated the agreement is a step toward peace and claims that it will end the U.S. war with Iran are currently attributed claims. We have not independently verified the existence of a signed agreement, nor the specific terms of such a deal, nor the current state of military conflict between the U.S. and Iran that the deal purportedly ends. Furthermore, the reports regarding the interaction between Trump and Macron require scrutiny. While we have verified that Trump is in France for the summit, the claims that Macron congratulated Trump for signing the agreement and that Trump sought to dispel tension are attributed to specific outlets like NPR and the Washington Times. These reports reflect the statements made by the leaders or their aides, but we cannot verify the internal sentiments or the private dynamics between the two men. The Ukraine ambition touted by Trump is also an attributed claim with no verified details available at this time. To understand the weight of these claims, it helps to look at the process. G7 summits often produce declarations of intent, but binding treaties are rarely signed on the sidelines. Announcements made at these venues are frequently the result of intense behind-the-scenes diplomacy, but they can also be aspirational. The context of U.S.-Iran relations has been volatile for decades, marked by sanctions, broken agreements, and rhetorical flare-ups. Any claim of a sudden end to hostilities would represent a dramatic departure from the established trajectory of this historical relationship. Similarly, the relationship between Trump and Macron has seen its share of public ups and downs, ranging from handshake wars to public disagreements on defense spending. However, diplomatic protocols usually require hosts to maintain a facade of cordiality. When a leader congratulates another at a summit they are hosting, it can be a standard diplomatic courtesy as much as it is a genuine endorsement of policy. Understanding these norms helps distinguish between political theater and substantive shifts in international alignment. The mention of Ukraine ambition adds another layer of complexity. The G7 has been a unified front in supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression, largely coordinating sanctions and aid. If President Trump is touting a new ambition regarding Ukraine, it could imply a shift in strategy, a new peace initiative, or a change in aid commitments. Without the verified details of this ambition, it remains an open variable in the summit's outcome, one that could significantly alter the geopolitical landscape if it deviates from the current coalition policy. As the G7 summit continues, the divergence in coverage highlights the different priorities in American political discourse. Progressives are anchoring on the potential for a de-escalation with Iran, viewing the summit through the lens of policy results. Conservatives are focusing on the projection of American strength and the repair of alliances, viewing the summit through the lens of leadership and optics. What remains verified is simply the president's presence in France. The reality of the Iran deal, the status of the war, and the details of the Ukraine plan are, for now, claims awaiting the test of time and evidence.